Every plugin in your DAW that promises analog warmth is trying to recreate something very specific, a physical process that happens when audio signal meets magnetic tape. But what is that process? What does warmth actually mean? Not as a marketing buzzword, but in real DSP terms. Today, we're going deeper than anyone else on YouTube has gone on this subject. I know that's a big claim, but stay with me and you'll find out why I'm saying this. We're going to break down the three phenomena that make tape sound like tape. Harmonic distortion from magnetic saturation, head bump from physical geometry of the tape heads, and high frequency roll-off from the limitations of the magnetic medium itself. And we're not just talking about theory. We're going to trace this science through three legendary tape emulations from Universal Audio: the Studer A800 multi-channel tape recorder, the Ampex ATR-102 mastering tape recorder, and the Oxide tape recorder. We'll look at the people who designed and built the original hardware, from a self-taught Swiss engineer who earned an honorary doctorate for his contributions to recording technology, to a Russian-born immigrant who changed American broadcasting forever, to a magnetic recording scientist whose calibration tapes are still used in every professional studio on earth. Then we're getting hands-on in the DAW. We'll run a full session through all three plugins: the Studer A800 on individual tracks during tracking, Oxide for creative color during mixing, and the Ampex ATR-102 on the stereo bus for the final master. You'll hear and see exactly what each plugin does to the real audio. If you've ever wondered why producers still reach for tape emulation plugins in a digital world, this video will give you the complete answer. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Kinetic Sound, where we embrace the idea that we don't start off as professionals, but we can all become pros through practice and knowledge. Before we talk about the plugins and hardware, we need to understand the physics. Trust me, I'm not going to bore you like your physics teacher did in high school. It's just enough to help you understand the details behind the magnetic tape. You'll thank me later. Besides, everything these plugins do, every knob, every switch, every parameter, is modeling a physical process that begins at the molecule level. A strip of magnetic tape is a thin plastic film coated with microscopic iron oxide particles. In their natural state, these particles are magnetically random. Their magnetic domains point in every direction and they cancel each other out. No signal. When audio passes through the record head of a tape machine, it creates a varying magnetic field. The fields align these tiny magnetic domains on the tape. The stronger the signal, the more domains align, and the more magnetic energy is stored on the actual tape. This is the fundamental mechanism of analog recording. But here's where it gets interesting. This process is not linear. If you plot the relationship between the input signal strength and the resulting magnetization on the actual tape, you don't get a straight line. You get a curve, specifically a hysteresis loop. At low signal levels, the relationship is roughly linear. But as you push more signal onto the tape, the domains begin to max out. They can only align so far. This is magnetic saturation. The resulting transfer function looks like an S-curve, a soft, gradual compression of the signal peaks. And this is fundamentally different from what happens in the digital world. When a digital signal exceeds 0 dBFS, it clips hard, the flat wall. A waveform is simply chopped off. But when an analog signal saturates magnetic tape, the peaks are gently rounded, soft clipping. And that gentle rounding is where the magic begins. When tape saturates and those peaks are gently rounded, the waveform shape changes. And when a waveform shape changes, new frequencies are created that weren't in the original signal. These are called Harmonics. It's important to note that not all harmonics are created equal. Tape saturation primarily generates even order harmonics, the second harmonic, the fourth, and the sixth. These are musically related to the fundamental frequency. The second harmonic is an octave above, and the fourth is 2 octaves above. Your ear perceives these as rich, warm, and musical. Contrast this with hard digital clipping, which generates primarily odd order harmonics, the third, the fifth, and the seventh. These create dissonant intervals. Your ear perceives them as harsh, buzzy, and unpleasant. This is the single most important thing to understand about tape saturation. It adds harmonics that your brain interprets as warmth, richness, and musicality. That's not a subjective opinion. It's a measurable, quantifiable acoustic phenomenon. When someone says a mix sounds warm, what they're often describing is even order harmonic content added by analog saturation. Now, there's a critical engineering detail we need to address. If you simply fed raw audio directly onto tape, the result would sound terrible, distorted, noisy, and nothing like a professional recording. The reason is that the bottom curve of the hysteresis loop is highly nonlinear. At very low levels, the tape barely responds. The solution that early tape engineers developed is called bias. It's a high frequency signal, typically between 80 kilohertz and 150 kilohertz, well above the range of human hearing, is mixed with the audio signal before it reaches the record head. This bias oscillator signal shifts the operating point on the hysteresis curve into the more linear region, dramatically improving fidelity. Bias adjustment is one of the most critical calibration parameters on any tape machine, and as we'll see later, it's a parameter that Universal Audio models in both the Studer A800 and the ATR-102 plugins. The second phenomenon that defines the tape sound is head bump. This is a resonant boost in the low frequency range, typically between 30 Hz and 150 Hz, that occurs because of the physical relationship between the tape head gap width, the tape speed, and the wavelength of the audio signal. Let's take a closer look. When a low frequency sound wave is recorded on tape, its wavelength on the tape is long, physically long. At 15 inches per second, a 100 hertz tone creates a wavelength of about 0.15 inches on the tape. The playback head reads this wavelength as the tape passes over it, and at certain frequencies, a resonance occurs between the head gap geometry and the signal wavelength. The result is a gentle boost in the low end. This is particularly intriguing because head bump varies with tape speed. At 30 IPS, the bump occurs at a lower frequency. At 15 IPS, it shifts even higher. At 7.5 IPS, it shifts higher still. This is why different tape speed settings on a plugin changes the low end character of the sound. You're literally moving the resonant frequencies of the head bump. The head bump is actually where the weight and body of the tape sound comes from. It's that thick, solid low end that makes a mix feel grounded and powerful. The third defining character is high frequency rolloff. Unlike the low end, which gets a boost, the high frequencies on tape are naturally attenuated or rolled off. And this happens through 3 distinct physical mechanisms. First, gap loss. The playback head has a physical gap. When the wavelength of the signal on the tape becomes shorter than the gap width, the head can no longer read it accurately. The signal weakens. At very high frequencies, it disappears entirely. Second, eddy current losses. The magnetic core of the tape head generates small circulating currents at high frequencies. These eddy currents dissipate energy as heat, effectively absorbing high frequency content. And third, erasure. When you record at very high levels, the high frequency energy on the tape can actually partially erase itself. The magnetic fields are so dense that they interfere with adjacent magnetization on the tape. The combined effect of all three mechanisms is a natural, gentle, high-frequency roll-off. And this is the smoothness that engineers associate with tape. It's a built-in de-esser, a built-in harshness reducer. Digital audio, by contrast, preserves every frequency with absolute precision, including frequencies that can sound brittle, harsh, or fatiguing. So how does a plugin replicate all of this? Universal Audio's approach is what they call component-level modeling. Their DSP engineers physically measure the behavior of a specific hand-selected piece of hardware. The actual hysteresis characteristics, the actual head bump resonance, the actual frequency-dependent saturation curves, it's all measured. Then they build a mathematical model of each component in the signal chain. For the tape plugins we're covering today, UA worked with AES magnetic recording expert Jay McKnight, a man who spent over 60 years studying the physics of magnetic tape to ensure the models were acoustically and scientifically accurate. This isn't guesswork or approximation. This is precision engineering applied to the sound. Now that you understand the science, let's meet the machines. Our story begins in Switzerland on December 17, 1912, when Willy Studer was born in the village of Hettingen near Zurich. Studer was a self-taught electronics engineer with an obsessive attention to precision, a quality that would define every product his company ever made. On January 5th, 1948, Studer founded his company. In the decades that follow, his team produced a series of tape machines that would become the standard in recording studios around the world. The first landmark was the Studer J37, released in 1964. It's important to note that the J37 is one of the most historically significant recording devices ever built because in 1967, at Abbey Road Studios in London, two Studer J37 four-track machines were connected together to record what many consider the greatest album in the history of popular music, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. That album's groundbreaking sonic experiments, the tape loops, the speed manipulation, the layered orchestration were all made possible by the J37. Then came the Studer A80 in 1970, which stayed in production for an astonishing 18 years. The A80 was the machine used for Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon and many of ABBA's landmark recordings. But the machine that concerns us today is the Studer A800, which was introduced in 1978. The A800 was a revolution. It was the first tape machine in the world to feature microprocessor-controlled transport. Think about that for a moment. In 1978, Studer was already integrating digital intelligence into analog recording hardware. The machine weighed approximately 900 pounds, supported three tape speeds, 7.5, 15, and 30 inches per second, and used 2-inch tape across 24 tracks. The A800 went through three revisions, Mark I, Mark II, and Mark III, before being discontinued in 1988. But in its decade of production, it became the multi-track recorder of choice for some of the most iconic records ever made. Metallica's Black Album, Jeff Buckley Grace, Tom Petty, Wildflowers, and A Tribe Called Quest, The Low End Theory, among many others. Willy Studer received an honorary doctorate from ETH Zurich in 1978 and the AES Gold Medal in 1982, the highest honor in audio engineering. He passed away on March 1st, 1996, but his machines live on in studios around the world and now in the Universal Audio's plugin. The beauty of the UA Studer A800 plugin lies in its provenance. UA unveiled the plugin at January 2011 NAMM show, and it was modeled from a specific machine, the Studer A800, owned by legendary engineer Alan Sides at Ocean Way Studios in Hollywood. The modeling process took 12 months, and UA's DSP engineering team worked directly with Jay McKnight, the AES magnetic recording expert who founded the Magnetic Reference Laboratory. Remember that name, Jay McKnight. He's going to come up again and again. Now we travel from Switzerland to the United States, and the story begins even earlier. Alexander M. Ponatov was born on March 25, 1892 in Kazan, Russia. He studied electrical engineering in Russia and Germany before immigrating to the United States. In 1944, he founded a small company in San Carlos, California. The company name was an acronym of his initials, AMP plus X for excellence, which when put together equates to Ampex. The breakthrough moment came through one of the most unlikely stories in audio history. In 1945, an American Army Signal Corps officer named John T. Mullen discovered a German device called the magnetophon in a Radio Frankfurt studio near the end of World War II. This machine could record and play back audio with a fidelity that stunned everyone who heard it because it used magnetic tape instead of the wire or disc recording methods that were standard at the time. Mullen bought 2 magnetophone machines and 50 reels of bass of tape back to the United States. He demonstrated them to Bing Crosby, who at the time was the biggest star in American entertainment. Crosby immediately understood the potential. He could pre-record his radio shows instead of performing them live, and he could edit out mistakes. Crosby invested $50,000 in Ampex to develop a commercial tape recorder, and in April 1948, the Ampex model became the first professional tape recorder manufactured in the United States. The first tape-delayed broadcast in the United States history followed shortly after that. Fast forward to the spring of 1976, at the AES convention in Los Angeles, Ampex revealed the ATR-100 series, a masterpiece of mechanical and electronic engineering. The ATR-100's most innovative feature was its pinch rollerless design. The traditional tape machines used a rubber pinch roller pressing against a capstan to grip and move the tape. The ATR-100 eliminated this entirely using bidirectional servo-controlled reel motors and an oversized capstan to move the tape with extraordinary precision. This reduced tape wear, improved speed stability, and produced cleaner recordings. The ATR-102, the stereo 2-track version of the ATR-100, became the gold standard for mastering. Approximately 3,000 units of the ATR-100 series were manufactured before production ended in 1982. The machine was inducted into the Technology Hall of Fame in 2005, and Ampex Corporation received a Technical Grammy Award in 2008 for its contributions to the recording technology. UA's Ampex ATR-102 plugin was released in 2011 and was fully authenticated by Ampex Corporation. Now, let me tell you about the person who ties all 3 of these plugins together. His name is Jay McKnight, who joined Ampex Corporation in 1952, just 4 years after the Model 200A launched. He spent 20 years at Ampex working on magnetic recordings at the deepest engineering level. After leaving Ampex, McKnight founded the Magnetic Reference Laboratory, or MRL. MRL produces the calibration test tapes that are used to align and calibrate tape machines in professional studios around the world and even today. If you've ever worked in a studio that runs tape, the machine was probably calibrated using MRL tape. McKnight became one of the most foremost authorities on magnetic recording through the Audio Engineering Society, contributing research papers, standards, and technical expertise for over 6 decades. When Universal Audio set out to model the Studer A800, they brought in Jay McKnight. When they modeled the Ampex ATR-102, Jay McKnight was there again. And when they created Oxide, a plugin with no hardware counterpart, they once again worked with Jay McKnight. One person, 6 decades of magnetic recording expertise. 3. UA tape plugins. McKnight isn't just a consultant in the story, he's the living thread that connects Ampex hardware legacy through Studer, Swiss precision to UA's digital recreation. The science of tape saturation that we covered in part 1, the hysteresis, the head bump, the high frequency roll-off, McKnight has spent a lifetime measuring, documenting, and understanding those exact phenomena. And that brings us to the third plugin in our lineup, one that is fundamentally different from the first two. The Oxide tape recorder has no hardware counterpart. It was never a physical machine. That's entirely by design. Oxide was engineered by the same core team, UA's DSP engineers, working once again with Jay McKnight, but with a deliberately different goal, where the A800 and the ATR-102 plugins painstakingly model every detail of a specific piece of hardware. Oxide is an abstraction. It distills the essential sonic characteristics of tape, the saturation, the head bump, the frequency response shaping into a simplified CPU-efficient interface with just a handful of controls. Think of it this way. The Studer A800 is the comprehensive multi-track experience. The ATR-102 is the precision mastering tool, and Oxide is UA's answer to the question, what if we took everything we learned from modeling these legendary machines and created the most accessible, versatile tape plugin possible? Oxide is also significantly more DSP efficient than either the A800 or the ATR-102, which makes it practical for use on many tracks simultaneously. It's built into the Luna recording system as a free extension, making it an entry point for anyone beginning their journey with tape emulation. Now, you've met the machines, you've met the people behind them. Let's take a closer look at the plugins themselves. In this section, we're going to walk through the key controls on each plugin that are directly relevant to the tape saturation science we covered in part 1. Keep in mind, we're not covering every single control today. To do so would require several hours per plugin. Today, we're focusing on the controls that shape harmonic distortion, head bump, and high frequency roll-off. Let's bring up the Studer A800 plugin. Input gain -12 to +24 dB. This is your primary saturation control. The further you push the input, the harder your driving signal into the actual virtual tape. At conservative levels from +1 to +3 dB, you get subtle harmonic enrichment. Push it to +6 dB and above, and you'll hear noticeable compression and saturation. Those even order harmonics we discussed before become increasingly prominent. Tape type. The A800 offers 4 tape formulations: 250, 456, 900, and GP9. Each formulation has different saturation characteristics because the physical tape coatings respond differently to magnetic energy. Ampex 456 is the classic hot tape with earlier saturation onset and pronounced warmth. Quantity GP9 is a modern formulation with more headroom and a cleaner response. Ampex 250 is the vintage option with the earliest saturation. Scotch 900 offers a balanced middle ground. IPS tape speed 7.5, 15, 30, or off. This directly controls head bump behavior. At 7.5 IPS, the head bump is centered higher in frequency and is more pronounced. At 30 IPS, the bump shifts lower and is more subtle. This is one of the most powerful tone shaping tools on the plugin. The cal level, +3, +6, +7.5, and +9. The calibration level sets the reference point for 0 VU on the meters. A higher cal level means more headroom before saturation, which means a cleaner recording at nominal levels. A lower cal level means that the tape saturates sooner, giving you more color and compression at the same input level. Path select: through, input, sync, and repro. This selects which path the audio takes through the actual virtual machine. Through bypasses tape simulation entirely. Clean pass-through. Input is the most direct monitoring path through the tape electronics with minimal head coloration. Sync models the record head doubling as a playback head. This was essential on the real hardware for overdubbing, where you needed to hear previously recorded tracks in perfect time alignment while recording new ones. Sonically, sync falls between input and repro, giving you the record head's own frequency response and saturation character without the full reproduce head coloration. Repro or reproduce adds the characteristics of both the record and playback heads, including the most pronounced head bump and frequency response coloration. This is the fullest tape sound. Now, let's bring up the ATR-102. Record level 0 to 10 dial per channel. This is the ATR-102's equivalent of the A800 input gain. It controls how hard you're driving signal into the virtual tape. The higher you push the record knob, the more saturation you get. But here's what makes the ATR-102 different from the A800. It has independent left and right record knobs, and the meter shows separate left and right channels. This makes it ideal for precise stereo mastering work where you need to ensure both channels are hitting the tape symmetrically. Reproduce level 0 through 10 dial per channel. This is the playback amplifier output control. And this is an important engineering detail. The reproduce knob is not a simple digital volume trim. UE modeled it as part of the actual analog playback amplifier circuit of the ATR-102. This means that as you adjust the reproduce knob, you're not just changing levels, you're changing how the modeled playback electronics behave, which introduces its own subtle coloration. In practice, you'll use the reproduce knob primarily for gain matching during A-B comparisons, compensating for the level increase from the record knob. But it's worth knowing that even this output control is contributing to the analog character of the plugin. Tape formula. The ATR-102 offers more tape options than the A800, and the available formulations change depending on your selected tape speed and head configuration. At 15 IPS, you might choose between GP9, 456, and 900. At 30 IPS, additional options become available. Each formula has a distinct saturation curve and frequency response. Head widths are quarter-inch, half-inch, and 1-inch. This is unique to the ATR-102 plugin. Different head widths produce different frequency responses and saturation characteristics. A wider head generally provides better low-frequency reproduction and a slightly different saturation character. The half-inch head is the classic mastering configuration. Transformer on-off. This is particularly intriguing because it models the input and output transformers of the physical machine. Transformers introduce their own subtle saturation, particularly in the low end, and add a characteristic RN coloration to the sound. Engaging the transformer adds weight and harmonic richness even before the signal reaches the actual virtual tape. We'll isolate this control in the session demo so you can hear exactly what the transformer alone does to the actual full mix. Emphasis EQ, NAB, CCIR, AES. These are the equalization standards used in different regions and eras of tape recording. NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters, was the American standard. CCIR was the European standard. Each applies different pre-emphasis and de-emphasis curves during recording and playback, affecting the overall tunnel balance and noise characteristics. Finally, let's look at Oxide. The contrast is immediate. Where the A800 has dozens of parameters and the ATR-102 has even more, Oxide presents you with just a handful of controls. Input -12 to +24 dB, same concept as the A800. Drive into the virtual tape for more saturation. IPS 7.5 and 15, 2 speeds instead of 4. This still gives you meaningful head bump variations. EQ is either NAB or CCIR, 2 emphasis curve options. Path select is either input or repro, 2 paths instead of 4. That's essentially it for tunnel shaping. Oxide also includes a noise reduction toggle, an output level, and power on and off. The simplicity is the point. Oxide is designed for speed and musicality. You can instantiate it on every track in a session without worrying about CPU load, and you can dial in tape character in seconds. It's the plugin you reach for when you want tape sound without the tape workflow. Let's take a look at all 3 plugins side by side. So Now that you have all of the details of what these controls do, let's bring up the plugins on screen and dive into an immersive demonstration. I'll play music through all 3 tape plugins and show you exactly how these controls affect the audio signals in real time. Watch as I adjust the parameters. I'll focus on the specific values, explain what those numbers mean technically, and show you why they matter for mastering these tools. This hands-on approach will give you the technical understanding you need to truly control these plugins. Let's dive in and take a closer look. But first, if you're getting some value from this video, please let me know by clicking the like button. Also, subscribe to the channel if you wish to see more videos like this. Don't forget to click on the notification button so you'll be alerted each time I post a new video. I've got many more plugins to cover in the future, so you'll definitely want to see those. Also, I've created a comprehensive resource pack for this video. It includes an engineering-level deep dive document covering all 3 tape plugins, a set of flashcards for quick reference, and a quiz to test your understanding, all completely free. Head over to the link in the description to collect these valuable freebies. It's my way of saying thanks for spending the time watching this video. And one thing I'd love to know, drop a comment below and tell me which of these 3 tape plugins are you most excited to try and on what kind of material. Drums, vocals, full mix. I read every comment and I'd love to hear how you plan to use the tape saturation in your own work. All right, let's get into the Digital Audio Workstation and put these plugins to work. Here's what we're going to do. We have a hip-hop track, a heavy beat with thundering layered kicks, an analog bass synth, hi-hats, a crash cymbal that hits periodically for emphasis, percussion, keyboard, synth, pads, effects, and both rap verses and a full song hook with male and female harmonies. And here's the thing. What better genre to showcase analog tape saturation than hip-hop? Think about it. Dr. Dre recorded through actual Studer and Ampex machines. That classic West Coast analog warmth is literally the sound of tape. And because hip-hop arrangements are sparse, there's space between the instruments so that you can hear exactly what each plugin does to each element. We're going to use all 3 tape plugins in the way each one was designed to shine. Studer A800 on individual tracks during tracking, because that's what the hardware was actually built for, multi-track recording. Oxide on mix buses for quick creative color because it's efficient, musical, and designed for this exact thing. Ampex ATR-102 on the stereo master bus because the ATR-102 was literally the last piece of hardware your mix touched before it became a record. Then we'll do a comparative A/B running the same source material through all 3 plugins so you can hear the differences. Let's start with drums. I've placed a Studer A800 instance on the kick group, the clap, hi-hat channel, and the crash cymbal. Now here's an important detail about the kick group. I have 2 different kick samples, a 909 and a sub-heavy 808 layered together on a single bus. I've placed the Studer on that combined bus, not on each kick individually. This is exactly how it would have worked in the analog world. Back in the day, you'd balance your kicks on the console, bus them to a single track on the multi-track tape machine to conserve tracks, and that some kick signal would hit the tape once. The tape doesn't see 2 separate kicks. It sees one combined waveform and saturates that. The intermodulation between the 2 kicks creates a different harmonic fingerprint than saturating each one independently. It's the glue that the tape gives to the sum signals. It's one of the reasons engineers bounce to tape as a mixing technique, not just because a recording necessity. For the kick group, I'm running Ampex 456 tape at 15 IPS, cal level +6, input push to +5 dB on the input path. That's a hot signal into a warm tape formulation, maximum saturation character for the low end. On the clap, I'm switching to 456 tape at 30 IPS cal level +6, input at +2 dB, and input path. The faster tape speed shifts the head bump lower so it doesn't muddy the clap's mid-range. The moderate input keeps the transient snap intact. For the hi-hats, open and close grouped together, I'm using Scotch 900 at 30 IPS cal level +6, input at just +1 dB, and input path. Gentle saturation here. The 900 tape is cleaner than the 456, and at +1 dB, we're adding subtle high-frequency smoothing without dulling the hats. And on the crash cymbal, same approach. Scotch 900 30 IPS, cal level +6, input +1 dB, input path. The crash only hits periodically for emphasis, so we want Studer to round off the metallic harshness without changing the fundamental character of the hit. Listen for the way the kick group fattens up with head bump. I'm using 15 IPS here to push that resonance right into the kick's sweet spot around 60 to 100 Hertz. Because both kicks are hitting the Studer as a summed signal, the combined transient pushes the virtual tape harder than either kick would alone. You get more saturation on that thundering combined hit. On the clap, the transient peak softens without losing crack. On the hi-hats, notice how the high-frequency roll-off tames those crispy hats, smoother without losing energy. And on the crash cymbal, which hits periodically throughout the track for emphasis, listen for how the Studer rounds off that harsh metallic sizzle while preserving the impact of the hit. Did you hear that? Notice how the kick fills out in the low end when the Studer is engaged. That thundering bottom end gets even thicker. And because both kicks are saturating together as a summed signal, they fuse into one cohesive low end punch rather than two separate elements. The clap's crack is slightly rounded but more solid. Those trap hi-hats, the harshness is gone, but the rhythmic energy is fully intact. And when the crash cymbal hits, it decays more smoothly, less digital sizzle, more natural ring. That's harmonic distortion, head bump, and HF roll-off all working together. For the bass, I'm using the same recipe as the kick group Ampex 456 at 15 IPS, cal level +6, input at +5 dB, and input path. I'm using 15 IPS to shift the head bump right into the bass synth's fundamental range, that 60 to 100 Hertz zone where the sub bass lives, and I'm pushing the input at +5 dB to get that saturated, round character that makes analog bass feel massive on speakers. Listen for the bass synth to go from clean and digital to warm, thick, and analog. That's the tape difference on bass. The dry analog synth sounds clean but a bit sterile. The Studer adds analog weight and harmonic richness that transforms it into something that feels like it's coming through a real studio subwoofer. This is exactly what engineers were hearing when they recorded through actual Studer machines in those legendary hip-hop sessions. We've got two very different vocal textures in this track, aggressive rap verses and a full sung hook with male and female harmonies. Let's hear both. For the rap vocals, I'm running Scotch 900 at 15 IPS, cal level at +3, input at +2 dB, and input path. The lower cal level means that the tape saturates a bit sooner, which adds grit and presence to the delivery. On the song hook, same tape and speed, 900 at 15 IPS, cal level +3, but I'm backing the input down to +1 dB, just enough to smooth the sibilants and warm the harmonies without adding aggression. On the rap vocals, I'm pushing slightly harder at +2 dB to add grit and presence. The studer will thicken the delivery without softening the aggression. On the song hook, I'm keeping it at +1 dB. We want that gentle high-frequency roll-off that smooths out sibilants plus warmth that helps the harmonies blend naturally.
So locked behind steel, some trace of fast money, some buried in the field. Every scar on my art got a lesson in disguise. Every cheer, mama cry, put some fire in my eyes. I remember nights, thinking life was unfair. Looking in the mirror, asking God if he cared. Not the same kid, everybody laughed at. Turning every no to a platinum comeback. Not them jerk with a in my hands. Nobody believed, but I stuck to the plan. Hanging in my chest, but the fire still burn. Every single loss was a lesson I had. On the bottom where the cold winds blow. Now I'm standing where they said I'd never go. They tried to bury me beneath their hand. The flower still grown when they clean it in the dirt.
On the rap verses, the consonants are slightly smoother, but the aggression is fully preserved. The studer rounds without softening the delivery. And on the song hook, the male and female harmonies blend more naturally. That's even order harmonic distortion, adding musicality related to frequencies that help stack vocals and fuse them together. Tape has always been the secret weapon for vocal harmony. Now I'm placing Oxide on the drum bus, the stereo bus that all individual drum tracks feed into. I've set Oxide to 15 IPS, knob emphasis, and repro path. With repro selected, we get additional head bump and frequency response character. At +4 dB of input, we're pushing into the moderate saturation territory. Listen for the drums to glue together. The individual elements will feel more cohesive, more like a single instrument rather than a collection of microphones. Hear how the drum sounds more unified when Oxide is engaged. That glue effect is tape compression. The saturation is gently limiting the peaks across the entire drum bus, reducing dynamic range in a musical way. And the head bump adds that chest punch quality to the low end. Here's where we bring in the heavyweight, the ATR-102 on the master bus, the last stop before the listener's ears. Here are the mastering settings. I've loaded GP9 tape for maximum headroom, half-inch head width for the classic mastering format, and 30 IPS for the deepest bass extension. Cal level is at +6. The record knob is at about 2 on both channels for gentle saturation. The reproduce knob is at 0. We'll use that for gain matching later. Emphasis EQ is grayed out because it's automatically disabled at 30 IPS. Path is set to repro, channels are linked, and the transformer is on. I'm using GP9 tape for maximum headroom on the master, half-inch head width for that classic mastering format, and 30 IPS for the deepest bass extension. At 30 IPS, emphasis EQ is automatically disabled, and that's historically accurate. At this tape speed, the frequency response is flat enough that pre-emphasis and de-emphasis curves aren't needed. The tape character at 30 IPS comes purely from saturation, head bump, and the natural high-frequency roll-off we covered in part 1. The record knob is at 2 on the dial for gentle saturation. The channels are linked for stereo mastering, and the transformer is engaged for additional harmonic weight. Listen for the entire mix to feel larger, warmer, and more polished.
Fast chronic coat, so locked behind steel. Some chasing fast money, some buried in the field. Every scar on my art got a lesson in disguise. Every cheer, mama cry, puts a fire in my eyes. I've been nice, thinking life was unfair. Looking in the mirror, asking God if he cared. Not the same kid, everybody laughed at. Turning every note to a platinum comeback. Came out them drop with a in my hands. Nobody believed, but I stuck to the plan. Pain in my chest, but the fire still grind. Every single loss was a lesson I had. On the bottom where the cold winds blow. Yeah. Now I'm standing where they said I never broke. Try to bury me beneath the hand. The flowers still grow when they planted in the press.
That's the record sound. The dry mix is clean and accurate, but the ATR-102 adds dimension, depth, and cohesion. The low end has more authority from the head bump and transformer saturation. The highs are slightly smoother from the natural roll-off, and the harmonic distortion makes the entire frequency range feel richer and more musical. Let me also show you what the transformer alone does.
Fast chronic coat, so locked behind steel. Some chasing fast money, some buried in the field. Every scar on my art got a lesson in disguise. Every cheer, mama cry, puts a fire in my eyes. I've been nice, thinking life was unfair. Looking in the mirror, asking God if he cared. Not the same kid, everybody laughed at. Turning every note to a platinum comeback. Fast chronic coat, so locked behind steel. Some chasing fast money, some buried in the field. Every scar on my art got a lesson in disguise. Every cheer, mama cry, puts a fire in my eyes. I've been nice, thinking life was unfair. Looking in the mirror, asking God if he cared. Not the same kid, everybody laughed at. Turning every note to a platinum comeback.
The transformer adds a subtle but real low in weight and mid-range density. It's especially audible on the bass and kick drum. There's an iron quality that thickens the bottom end. Finally, let's hear what each plugin does to the same source material. I've soloed the drum bus and placed all three tape plugins in the signal chain, Studer, Oxide, ATR-102, each at actual settings I would use in a session. I've got all three plugin windows on screen alongside M Multi-Analyzer, and I'm using my Launchpad to switch between them in real time. Watch the analyzer and listen for the tonal character as I switch. Each one has its own flavor. The Studer has the most pronounced multi-track character, heavier saturation with that thick, warm bottom end. Oxide is the most transparent of the three, tape color without dramatic alteration. And the ATR-102 has the most refined, polished character. It's the mastering sheen. So as you can hear, this isn't about which tape plugin is the best. There is no best. It's about which one is best for the role. The Studer is the best multi-track recorder. ATR-102 is the best mastering deck. And Oxide is the best bus glue, lightweight enough to put on every bus in your session, musical enough to make the elements on each bus fuse into one cohesive sound while adding the right amount of color. The real power is knowing when to reach for each one, and now you do. So let's bring it all together. Today, we broke down the three phenomena that make tape sound like tape. Harmonic distortion from magnetic saturation, the even order harmonics that your brain perceives as warmth and musicality, head bump, the low frequency resonance from the physical geometry of the tape heads that adds weight and body, and high frequency roll-off, the natural attenuation of harsh high frequencies through gap loss. eddy currents, and self-erasure that creates smoothness. Harmonic distortion plus head bump plus HF roll-off equals tape warmth. That's the equation. That's what warmth means in DSP terms. We trace the science through 3 legendary tape emulations: the Studer A800 for multi-track tracking, the Ampex ATR-102 for stereo mastering, and Oxide as Universal Audio's philosophical distillation of everything they learned. We told the stories of Willie Studer, Alexander Ponatov, and Jay McKnight, the engineer whose 6 decades of expertise in magnetic recording connects all 3 of these plugins. And we heard what each plugin does to real audio in a real session. If you haven't already grabbed the free deep dive document, flashcards, and quiz, head down to the description and click the link. It's a complete reference covering everything we discussed today: the science, the history, the settings, all in one place. Next time, we're tackling something that most producers avoid because it sounds intimidating: mid-side EQ. I'm going to show you exactly when stereo width becomes a problem and how the BrainWorks BX Digital V3 fixes it. If you've ever had a mix that sounded great in mono but fell apart in stereo, or the opposite, you don't want to miss that one. Drop your questions and thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know which of these 3 tape plugins you're planning to put on your next session and where in the chain. Until next time, keep learning, keep practicing, and keep growing. See you in the next one.